good natural resources, especially in the western states, are drying up. So quarries are having to go into lower quality deposits. Lower quality deposits is leading to, we call it low durability in the sand. So the sand degrades from the time you produce it to the time you use it in a concrete batch plant. And one of the key ways to combat that then is by supplementing a manufactured sand.
We've seen examples where there's aggregate deposits that are maybe marginal in terms of their competence or strength, but running that material through selective crushing or more locally known as weighting, we can remove those weaker particles. We can produce a stronger aggregate, but ultimately the sand that is then generated is also very strong itself. Within the UK, we're seeing I suppose a diverse mix of I suppose crushed dusts, which are, in line with your comment, Ryan, are nearly a byproduct of the crushing process that are surplus to requirement or are secondary. We can take those and wash those and elevate a relatively coarse dust into a high value grit on a in-spec concrete sand. There's also a continuation of I suppose you linked into quarry resource as a bigger topic. I suppose quarry lifetime is a big part of it as well. If you can consume everything and convert everything that you have within that deposit into a product, then you can extend the life of the quarry. Again, there's been examples of where sites have been extended 5, 10, 15 years because they're able to consume everything that's available to them.
Very highly efficient. You're not losing any fine particles with the overflow of the cyclones. That's number one. That has been proven many times in with the performance statements and also the testing in front of the clients. And the second thing is, it's really so successful removing the unnecessary excessive fines of the crush rock, like from 17% down to 3%, or even in some cases down to 2% is possible with the Evo wash.
Welcome back to episode 9 of Talking Tons. I'm your host, Lauren McMaster, part of the marketing team here at CDE. Joining me for today's discussion are 3 of my colleagues from the global team. Dogan Ozel, who has been developing CDE's offer in the Middle East and Africa since 2018. Ryan O'Lone, who has delivered wet processing projects for customers in the UK, Australia and the US, and is currently looking after our customers across the west coast of the United States. And William Melanophy, Head of Business Development for the UK and Ireland region. William joined CDE as a graduate technical engineer and now brings over 10 years of experience in the crushed rock industry. Today we'll be focusing on crushed rock and manufactured sands. We'll start by exploring what manufactured sands are, why they matter, and how they're transforming construction and infrastructure projects worldwide.
I'll kick off. Ultimately, manufactured sands are anything that has been produced, any sand that has been produced artificially, and that could be from hard rock, or it could be from alternative sources, secondary sources as well. I suppose it leads us into the next question of why would we do that? Well, primarily based in the UK, the main driver more recently has been a shortage of natural sands. Areas such as the south of Ireland are predominantly hard rock, and the same situation plays out in the south of England, where there is that shortage of natural sands present, and ultimately the deficit needs to be made up by alternative means, and more recently that has been producing manufactured sands from those hard rock sources. Appreciate that. I suppose we have a range of experience. Maybe there's other drivers in other regions.
So just to give some examples from Turkey, for example, depends on the location, of course, but there are 2 main reasons, I would say. The first one could be the lack of availability of the natural sand, and let's say is east part of Turkey. But considering Istanbul, it's a very large, high populated city, consuming roughly 50 million tons of aggregates in total per year. And so the shortage of sand is not a matter in Istanbul, but the price of the sand is so high, the natural sand is so high that the people are looking for some alternative solutions. And for this reason, the crush rock and manufactured sand is another alternative, which is replacing the natural sand with a high, good quality. which is given almost exactly the same strength levels of concrete. That would the price is going to be the second maybe to list all this.
Similar issues in the US. I suppose at the core of it, good natural resources, especially in the western states, are drying up. So quarries are having to go into lower quality deposits. Lower quality deposits is leading to, we call it low durability in sand. So the sand degrades from the time you produce it to the time you use it in a concrete batch plant. And one of the key ways to combat that then is by supplementing the manufactured sands. So we know like they're typically much stronger grains. They've got properties that the natural sands sometimes don't carry.
It's interesting that I suppose both of your points relate to quality. I suppose it stands to sense that if the particles have withstood the impact of crushing, then effectively the weaker or I suppose weaker bonds within that material at a particular level, ultimately what remains is stronger. There's probably a point there in terms of grading as well. So strength is one part for grading also. Particularly in areas where there's a prevalence of fine sands, that lack that top end, that maybe aren't suitable for concrete. We have the ability to tailor. What that grading looks like, because we're in control of ultimately a process that would have previously taken millions of years. We can simulate that through crushing and can replicate that to ultimately define what the output really looks like. I suppose the same analogy applies to aggregates as well. We've seen examples where there's aggregate deposits that are maybe marginal in terms of their competence or strength, but running that material through selective crushing or more locally known as weighting, we can remove those weaker particles. We can produce a stronger aggregate. But ultimately the sand that is then generated is also very strong itself, because whilst the bonds might have been weaker at an aggregate level, at a sand level, it's incredibly strong and can be used in high strength applications. Again, I suppose it carries that if we're in control of the process that makes that sand, we're in control of the consistency. I'm sure that's something that I suppose both of you have seen in your respective regions about the variations that we can see from one deposit to the next.
Just to say something on this one, maybe the sand deposits, the natural sand deposits are usually comes with clay. So what is minus 75 microparticles is usually clay particles, but it's not exactly the same in the manufactured sand applications. It's easy to, let's say, correct the gradation of the sand, the manufactured sand, because the clay as a mineralogy, it really absorbs water. It's really water demanding mineral, but usually what you produce in an artificial environment is just the fines of the rock body itself, and that needs to be corrected during the process. It's easier to handle in a washing application, honestly speaking. And you're right. So first of all, maybe just to touch on the sustainability part, the crush truck in Turkey, for example, most of the cases the concrete is consisting of three elements. We call it as aggregate number 1, number 2, and the sand. So that goes with 30, 30, 30, let's say mostly. But in a manufactured artificial crushing environment, what you're producing is a kind of, you don't control it. If you are using a VSI, mostly you are crushing 40% or 50% of manufactured sands, which accumulates in the quarry, and that needs to be consumed and converted into valuable particles to be consumed in the ready mix applications. So consistency is something else, yes.
There's also a continuation of, I suppose you linked into quarry resource as a bigger topic. I suppose quarry lifetime is a big part of it as well. If you can consume everything and convert everything that you have within that deposit into a product, then you can extend the life of the quarry. Again, that's there's been examples of where sites have been extended 5, 10, 15 years because they're able to consume everything that's available to them. But there's also a point in terms of, I suppose, product diversity as well. If there's hard rock quarries, well, traditionally, the market for those would have been primarily for aggregate for obvious reasons. But if they can produce a sand product, they become a one-stop shop in terms of supporting the local market as well. And obviously that feeds into the logistics as well in terms of the transportation costs as well.
Typically, these resources are already there. Like, I don't know about you guys, but I've lost count of the amount of sites where I've gone to, and there are literal mountains of 1 mil, 2 mil gravel that have been screened out of the aggregates because they don't quite fit concrete. We would call it 57 and number 8 aggregates in the United States, or construction concrete aggregates. They don't fit into the sand, and you end up with this, they call it chat. It's this waste product that just builds and builds and builds and is never consumed. So yeah, we're seeing guys move towards, rolls crushers, variations and cone crusher setups and VSIs to get through this material. Number one, getting rid of your waste, and number two, bolster your resources and your sand use as well.
I suppose that leads nicely into maybe the topic of how, how are we producing manufactured sands? Obviously there'll be regional variation. Within the UK, we're seeing I suppose a diverse mix of I suppose crushed dusts, which are in line with your comment, Ryan, are nearly a byproduct of the crushing process that are surplus to requirement or are secondary. We can take those and wash those and elevate a relatively coarse dust into a high value grit on a in-spec concrete sand. So we take what's secondary into high value products with very, very little wastage, because they're inherently, as you have rightly said, Dogan, they're inherently very low in clay. But it leads us on to the question of what is the true start point. We also have the applications where we're effectively taking from the rock face and intentionally taking all of that material down to sand as well. Are there any other regional difference?
One biggest concern in my clients' mind, usually when you start speaking about washing applications to them, they are so much concerned about when you remove the minus, let's say 200 mesh in US, let's say, or 63 micron content. So the sand is going to be coarser, and ultimately they would like to produce a kind of replacement sand to the natural one, which is true in somehow, because mathematically when you remove the minus 75 micron, you cannot help it. It will get coarser at the end of the day. But manufacturing or using it as a C33 sand is still possible. In CD, we have some other solutions, of course, to overcome that problem, using dual pass applications, producing two different grades of sand at the same time. So maybe it's good to touch upon that point. I don't know what is your experience in the US, but
in the US, typically blending these materials is the way to go. A natural sand and a manufactured sand have two different properties. You have the increased strength of a manufactured sand and the better finish of a natural sand. So maybe we don't have as many scenarios as you guys would have of a pure crusher dust application. It's it's more typically a supplementary material. They like to maintain that finish of the natural sand. They bolster the strength.
It'd be fair to say that in any case, appropriate evaluation of the starting material is probably the critical part. That often defines the route in terms of crushing. Material hardness and obviously the material characteristics all feed into that. The crushability, the way it's going to present itself to each stage of the crushing process, and more fundamentally, what does it look like after it's been crushed? We've a lot of tools that we can call upon to refine that grading. In some cases, depending on the start point, if it's on the lower end of the scale, maybe rolls crushers are the most appropriate route. Sometimes VSI crushers, if we're starting slightly higher. Obviously, if we're taking from quarry face, then we'll be looking at jaw or maybe primary impactor as well. But I suppose it's a complete evaluation of the type of material, on what the start point is, and where we need to get it to as well.
I think it is good to touch upon how CD overcome or tackle around those kind of problems of clients. So we have a very good proven technology, EvoWash, and most of the cases I personally advise EvoWash to my Turkish clients, as you all know. So the thing is, it's very highly efficient. You're not losing any fine particles with the overflow of the cyclones. That's number one. That has been proven many times in with the performance statements and also the testing in front of the clients. And the second thing is, it's really so successful removing the unnecessary excessive fines of the crushed rock, like from 17% down to 3%, or even in some cases down to 2% is possible with the Evo Wash. And the biggest advantage when we make a comparison, let's say, is the completed dewatered product after the dewatering screen. So right, ready to go off the belt to the trucks, and they stockpile it. They're all very happy about the our Evo Wash technology. In some points, they have some concerns if the material is hard wrapped, let's say, because of the let's say the wear items. And how we can overcome that situation is mostly we put a kind of press screen and screen the oversized particles like 2 mm or 3 mm, whatever the possibility is over there. And minus 3 mm goes into the Evo Wash, but plus 2 mm goes straight off the belt. And that's how we can improve the lifetime of the wear items as well. So it's the technology that we are utilizing in Turkey.
I suppose it follows then maybe to cover a couple of real world examples. You've touched on an example in Turkey. I suppose one closer to home, similar to the scenario that we've discussed, where we're taking a hard rock quarry and driving that all into sand. There's a local application for a precast manufacturer, where previously they had been basically buying in all of their sand demand. So there was a massive demand for sand, but logistically there was a challenge in buying that material in, because we talked about consistency in terms of grading and quality, but something as simple as color could have a very big impact in their finished product. So they were taking in natural sand from 10 different sources, and there was 10 different colors inevitably that resulted. There was 10 different gradings. There was 10 different material characteristics. There were 10 different moisture contents. So to pick up on the point that you have raised, so logistically that was very, very challenging to manage in terms of the consistency of supply and making sure that was always there. But from a practical point of view, moisture contents, if they were too high, could cause blockages in bins. So the site in question acquired a site, a hard rock site that suited their distribution, but ultimately there was no sand there. So we were approached to come up with the right solution to generate as much sand as possible. I suppose the takeaway success from that was that within approximately 2 to 3 weeks of the plant being up and running, they had in some of their precast applications switched over to 100% manufactured sands, which was really, really astoundingly fast adoption of ultimately a new material into their process. It performed fantastically. The strength was excellent. The consistency was level throughout. Moisture contents were reduced, and ultimately the logistical challenges that they did have basically dissipated overnight. So I suppose it highlights the impact and the importance that manufactured sands have within the bigger picture, and how much of a benefit that they can bring to other the other industries or around the sand washing piece. And I suppose maybe it'd be interesting to hear if there's any other stories similar from the other regions.
You talk about how big a part to play manufactured sands can have. It's amazing when you start to look around the world, the scenarios that people find themselves in. Hawaiian Cement, where we have 2 or 3 plants at this stage, there's 100% embargo on sand mining on that island. Like, you think about where Hawaii is in the middle of the Pacific, to not be able to extract a natural resource and rely either on creating a resource, as they're doing with the manufactured sand, or barging it in for, God knows what the transportation costs are. So that's a scenario where, must do is a hard master would say in Ireland. And the necessity of having to use a manufactured sand has produced probably, one of the best examples of a 100% crushed rock, crushed sand site that we have in our catalogue. And yeah, they've been running pretty successfully for 6-7 years now. But yeah, it's that we sometimes talk about islands driving the economics of plants, be that a physical island like Hawaii, or an economical island like Switzerland, or, a logistical island somewhere like New York, or we have Basilico, where transportation is just a no-go. To go 10 miles takes you an hour. These alternative methods of producing sand and resources are
Ultimately,
very important.
ultimately, we're going to see, as the natural sand depletes, we're going to see more hard rock islands appearing. So exactly as you say, it doesn't necessarily have to be an island, but the islands exist there, and they are becoming bigger. So that mentality will change as time progresses.
Similar example to yours, William, over here. For example, Saudi Arabia, mostly considered to be a kind of sand-rich country, but in the south of the country, for example, we have a good example. So the client is a precast manufacturer, like in your example, and he used to buy the sand from 300 kilometers away from his factory. And then finally, in 3 years back in Balmashow, he decided to invest into a new washing facility from CDE for his quarry. It was a very hard rock. It was basalt, I think. But we have washed the sand, and completely he has stopped buying any sand from outside of his factory. And he's utilizing the sand, manufactured sand available to his use in his own quarry. That was a big impact in his costs and the precast manufacturing. That was a very good example, honestly speaking. And the other point is, like, there are different crushing technologies which you touched upon before. And one of them in Turkey, which crushes down to 2 mm, just to make it very similar to the natural sand available in the region, and that's been washed after crushed to down to 2 mil. It has some excessive fines after the crushing technology, because coming like 25%, but we have applied a double wash to that application, and client is selling his product with almost the same body of a natural sand. So that's just increasing the revenue generation of their clients, and of course having a big impact on their return on investment.
It does highlight that versatility, I suppose, in the way in which we approach these challenges. We've listened to, or we've discussed a range of different approaches. We're all on the same theme of manufactured sand. We're coming at it from a lot of different angles there, but I suppose collectively the story today, I suppose, highlights the importance of manufactured sands in our industry, and recognizes that it is going to continue to grow. It is going to continue to be a key part of what we do, and what the industry requires to keep doing what it needs to do as well.
True. I think we could see it something like this. At the end of the day, we are just consuming the natural resources, and it will deplete in a day. Maybe not in 10 years, not in 100 years, but it will deplete and it will be ended. So we just need to find a new solution to overcome all those challenges of the environment and use the resources in a good manner. So crushed sand manufactured sand is continuously growing markets all over the world, especially in Middle East and Africa. I need to make a comment on my perspective, but I'm seeing the same situation in over the world, let's say.
And that wraps up our conversation on crushed rock and manufactured sands. A big thank you to Dogan, Ryan and William for sharing your insights today. And if you'd like to learn more, be sure to check out the links in the description below. We'll catch you next time on Talking Tons.